Thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here and for organizing this wonderful meeting where we've managed to identify new collaborations and also revive the old contacts. It's a great event. So today, I never prepare my talks, and I never actually practice because every time I try to be different. And at this conference, for the first time, I will present one of our projects that is coming up. We made a decisive move to go ahead with this project, and just recently, last week, it's called LONGENESIS. So bear with me till the end of the presentation, and I think it relates to Metabesity very strongly. So I'm going to be talking about two emerging technologies today. One is AI, deep learning specifically, and another one is blockchain. So how many of you are very familiar with blockchain technologies? 2 people, 3 people. Great, then you're going to learn something as well in terms of some of the applications beyond Bitcoin. Our company specializes in AI from the kind of top-down biomarker discovery and disease hypothesis perspective. So we work with millions of data sets, primarily with gene expression data sets. But we also work in AI for molecular generation, for identifying new molecules that can be effective in certain diseases, sometimes even without knowing the exact target. And of course, we rely on human intelligence when the top-down and the bottom-up hypothesis meet. So I have a team of medicinal chemists and team of experienced molecular biologists that are trying to back the hypothesis. So nothing we do is entirely AI-driven yet, but we are going to get there. We publish quite a bit, and we published some seminal work in deep learning. Some of our recent papers you should take a look at for sure, like Drugon, the generative adversarial autoencoder for generating new molecular fingerprints and new molecular structures. And we've got lots more on PubMed in other areas in advanced bioinformatics primarily. Unlike many other AI companies that like to make big claims, we actually try to publish at least the proof of concept. So today what I'm going to be talking about is how those technologies converge to address metabesity. And for me, I don't see much difference between metabesity and aging, for example, because those are very interrelated terms. And I'm going to be talking about artificial intelligence for drug discovery very briefly. I'm going to be talking about AI for biomarker development very briefly, AI and blockchain for personal data management, and AI and blockchain for behavioral modifications. So to completely eliminate metabesity at some point of time, hopefully, in the very near future. So I'm going to start with AI for drug discovery. So all of you know that the pharmaceutical industry is becoming less and less effective. There are many reasons for this. One is that the lowest hanging fruits have been already picked up. So metformin and aspirin have been discovered almost a century ago, so for metformin, and over a century ago for aspirin. So it's difficult to find effective new drugs. And second is that the regulatory framework changed. You really need to perform clinical trials. And in many cases, those clinical trials fail. That's why we think that AI, considering it takes more than $2.6 billion to take the drug through clinical trials, and you've got 92% failure rate, and in many cases, you just didn't do enough experimentation and go through the data before you start a clinical trial. So we think that this industry is the most, is going to be disrupted by AI the most. So lots of high throughput experiments, lots of data available, lots of examples. Unfortunately, not that many successful stories to train on. But we think that this industry is going to be disrupted faster than automotive. And if you think about what's happening currently in automotive, you've got driverless cars using technology that is just 1.5 years old. And people are entrusting their lives to a car driven by deep learning systems that basically, again, just 1.5 years old, going 220 miles an hour, and without any human interference. One mistake and you're dead. With pharma, you've got a little bit more time before you're dead. So I think there is a lot of disruption coming up in AI and specifically in drug discovery. So Anthony briefly mentioned deep learning. So deep learning is not a very new technique. Some of those concepts of deep neural networks go back to the 1950s and 1960s, but it really emerged and started outperforming humans very recently. So I would say 2010, 2012, that's when you got first successful experiments with deep learning. And 2013, 2014, that's when it picked up. And 2015, that's when deep learning started conclusively outperforming humans in multiple areas like image recognition, voice recognition, text recognition, autonomous driving, and even the Go champion was just recently defeated by deep reinforcement learning. So it's a very new field, and it's actually generating a lot of hype around AI. So right now, if you're going to any machine learning conference or any investor conference, you're going to see hundreds of AI companies out there claiming that they are doing AI, and they might be just doing linear regression. They do it to raise funding. But this picture was published in 2015. Andrei Karpathy, who now works for Tesla. Before that, he was working for OpenAI, and before that, he was a postdoc at Stanford. And I think he set a few kind of records in terms of salaries and compensations by some of those companies. But it's one of the most prolific and most important young people in deep learning, Andrei Karpathy. So on this picture, you can see a deep learning system accurately describing a woman standing with a tennis racket with two people in green behind her. It's a completely AI-driven annotation of the image. So let's call it the image-to-text synthesis. And there are many, many examples like that that you can see even right now. Real-time videos are being annotated by deep learning very accurately. So that's the power. And those are the algorithms that are driving autonomous vehicles right now. You see this in real time on the street. Objects being recognized in the matter of a tenth of the millisecond, and feeding this data back into the processor to basically think about whether to avoid or take the obstacle. There are lots of companies, as I mentioned, in AI. Sometimes that's not true AI, but there are some pure play deep learning companies, like, for example, Atomwise or several others in Silicon Valley. So we are here as well. CB Insights is one of the very famous industry analysts. And there is going to be probably double that number next year. So there are startups coming up online every day almost. So what we did for drug discovery, we created a comprehensive pipeline of deep neural network algorithms for working with transcriptomic data, with structural data. So we work with disease signatures, and we also work with molecular structures. But one area that we pioneered, and we were the first to publish it and the first to validate, was the application of generative adversarial networks to generate novel molecular fingerprints. And a couple papers on molecular pharmaceutics and oncotargets were kind of seminal in the field. And that's the technique I'm going to briefly touch on to show you the power of generative adversarial networks. So this is a really cool paper that's kind of set the stage for us, even though that we also submitted around the same time the similar work on molecules. So this is generative adversarial networks applied to text-to-image synthesis. So that's where you actually make deep neural networks imagine new objects de novo from scratch. So again, why we work with imaging so much is because when you see it, you believe it. In the molecular space, in the chemistry space, it's very difficult to validate your results. And here you've got an adversarial game between two deep neural networks trained on hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of images. The generator, which generates kind of meaningful noise in response to textual input, and the discriminator, which identifies whether the output of the generator is true or false. And these networks engage in an adversarial game and train each other to come up with something like this. So, a picture is worth 1,000 words. In our world, as we call it, a picture is worth 1,000 genes. But in this case, your text might be worth 1,000 pictures. So let's say if we're talking about molecules, let's think about flowers. So you give this deep generative adversarial network a phrase: this white and yellow flower have thin white petals and a round yellow stamen. And this is what the deep neural network, generative adversarial network, comes up with. So it imagines new structures. So sometimes it imagines those structures better than I do. So better than human imagination accuracy. And I guess that's pretty recent, so last summer. So last December, another group published on very similar concept, which allows you to come up with photorealistic images. So you are making generative adversarial networks imagine new structures de novo with photorealistic quality. And just recently, a few weeks ago, people published a very similar paper showing that you can generate videos now, and also short videos. So we are going to get into major virtual reality very soon in imaging. So, but what we decided to do is that can we actually apply this technique to molecules? And we published a paper in December 2016, but we actually submitted it in June 2016. Took us 2 months to find reviewers for this paper because nobody knew how generative adversarial networks work. And here we created a deep neural network. So we basically combined a generator and a discriminator in one single generative adversarial autoencoder where we feed the properties of the molecule, the molecular fingerprints on the input layer, and try to reconstruct the same molecule on the output layer of the deep neural network. And in between, there are less and less neurons on the latent layers, and those neurons learn the properties of the molecule. So we trained it on more than 70 million molecular fingerprints. And in the latent layer, we started doing some neurosurgery. And we created a discriminator in the latent layer, which came from a high throughput experiment from NCI, where a large number of human cell lines were exposed to a large number of anti-cancer agents, and growth inhibition index for each molecule was measured for many concentrations of the molecule. So it's a very long story if I were to tell you the experiments we did, but essentially we asked this deep neural net to generative adversarial network to create a number of molecules that can, at certain concentration, produce a certain tumor growth inhibition index for a certain cell line. And it came up with molecules that are already have proven anti-cancer activity. And we also got a large number of untested molecules with novel structures. We actually tested those and showed that they also have anti-cancer properties, and we can correctly predict tumor growth inhibition, generate molecules that that result in specific growth inhibition at certain concentration. So that was the first proof of concept, and then we went further. Now I can generate molecular graphs. So I can get molecular graphs, almost perfect, for up to 17 different parameters, and also for a specific target. So that's the nature of our work primarily. 80% of what our company is doing is this. We do this for the pharmaceutical company because it accelerates drug discovery process. It introduces lots of interesting chemical diversity in the field. And also it generates almost perfect molecules that are drug-like, and we also have lots of toxicity and efficacy scoring mechanisms that are embedded in the generator. So that's how we got our own pipeline of the large number of pharmacological leads that we're taking through the various validation stages. And one of the companies Jim Mellon invested in his fund called GENERATIVE licensed a few compounds from us, and they're helping us come up with better and better molecules for specific disease indications. So one of my very favorite areas of research is fibrosis and xenofibrosis, and there we have 12 very highly promising molecules that we are developing ourselves and also in collaboration with some of the pharmaceutical companies. But we also decided that we should try and get consumer insights to be able to validate some of our hypotheses, because again, in AI, validation is key. And when you are working with imaging data, it's very easy because you can use your own brain to validate. In the molecular space, it's much more difficult. So we try to, I collaborate with most of the beauty and cosmetics companies worldwide, processing their data and giving them novel insights into their data. But we're also trying to bridge that into drug discovery. And we also started our own nutraceutical project basically a couple of years ago. And right now we are pretty advanced in that. So we can even generate molecules using GANs and then map some of those to the natural compound space and see what we can sell as GRAS, basically generally recognized as safe products, because people buy nutraceuticals anyway. It's a $35 billion business. So at the very least, we want to try and come up with more intelligent way to create nutraceuticals with a specific purpose and test our ability to predict the combination level effects. So combine various molecules and see how they interact together, and also understand the population level sensitivity of our predictions. So far we've got a product called Ageless Cell with a company called Life Extension. They have about 350,000 customers in the US. And those are very educated customers that read scientific papers and also subscribe to Life Extension catalog. So it's kind of like in between the general consumer and scientists, so kind of citizen scientists. And some of them, they actually go for blood tests annually. So we'll get blood tests back. So today we actually launched a product called Longevity AI. I didn't come up with this name, so we just provide the formulation to Life Extension, and they do all the marketing and sales. And we get the data back. So that's the idea. So in this combination, we came up with vitiferin A, gamma-linolenic acid, and genosenicides. So we predict this combination to have the various metabolic regulatory effects. And the beauty of working with Life Extension is that they provide, through their partnership with LabCorp, blood testing services to a very large cohort of their customer base. So we are planning to get some of those customers to come back to us with blood tests and also with other data. So we would be able to analyze and see if our product is causing a desired effect. If it's not, we are going to take it off the market. Again, it's a longer story, but I try to rush through it. So I'll talk a little bit about our efforts in biomarker development. And again, some of the concepts that were developed for imaging analysis and image recognition, we're taking into medicine and into drug discovery and biomarker development space. So similar ideas from Andrei Karpathy. So if I show my deep neural network a transcriptome, I want my deep neural network to basically tell you where does this sample come from, how old is the patient, the gender of the patient, tissue of the patient, and hopefully a disease. So we have some of those deep neural network trained on large numbers of transcriptomic and proteomic data, but also other data types. I'm just giving one example of what we do. While working with lots of data, we started basically getting some insights into what data types are predictive and what data types are less predictive and more valuable. So there is lots of data you can collect about the patient and or any person, and lots of this data is actually publicly available and very easily available. So pictures, for example, so selfie, to me now, I put a lot of value into selfies, because you can actually, and I'll talk about that in the presentation, you can get a lot of valuable physiological parameters from a selfie or from a short video. Clinical history is very important, common blood tests, you can get those in millions. You can get imaging data, urine test, social network feed. So there is lots of data within Facebook, Google, and Apple that could be used for health purposes. But also there are rare data types. A lot of people are putting a lot of kind of emphasis on the genomic data. I think that the value of this data is overrated. And sometimes pictures are even more representative of who you are than your genome. Epigenomic data and many other data types. And there are so many data types that we don't know of. So one of the major contributions that I think my group did to the made to the field of aging research in AI is that we asked asked ourselves a question. So, what feature is the most ubiquitous in the population? What can we predict? And what feature is most biologically relevant? And we realized that it's age. So if I train the deep neural networks on any data type to predict your age, predict your chronological age in a healthy state and then in disease states, I can derive a lot of biological information from those predictions. And when I train the predictors on large amounts of data to predict your age, those deep neural networks capture the most biologically relevant features from the data type that I'm feeding it. And I can do permutation feature. I can basically understand the importance of each feature, and in some cases I can even derive causality. And then I can retrain some of those deep neural networks on specific diseases. So for example, on the subpopulation of Alzheimer's patients where we have only a few thousand or maybe 10,000 samples. So you don't have abundant data sets. And what's important is that for us, we at Insilico treat aging as a disease for artificial intelligence purposes. Because if I'm predicting your age using any data type, I'm essentially predicting a condition. And if I can see that there is a change, biologically relevant change, to me it's a process, and we would like to classify it as a disease. So we want to understand kind of the intimate transition from aging to pathology. And I think deep learning allows you to do that pretty well. So you basically train on more or less healthy state, and then you retrain or test on specific conditions. And then you can see what features that you're feeding into your deep neural networks are most predictive, most biologically relevant. And in some cases, you can even identify useful targets like that. So we also came up with a resource called agenet.net. It's a place where we conduct hackathons and competitions for people worldwide to essentially test their machine learning expertise on various data types. And we just recently did a skin hack with a company called Beiersdorf, called Nivea. It's a Nivea brand, where we developed one of the most accurate predictors of your chronological age just by using pictures of your face. So I got lots of predictors of age trained on different data types. So in green, that's what we already have, and it's validated. And also I've got lots of population-specific data, so coming from various countries, to predict your age. And then we look at the various features within every data type that contribute to the accuracy of the predictor the most. Then we combine those features into multi-modal deep neural nets to predict your age on multiple data types. And then we retrain on diseases using a technique called transfer learning. So many of you have not ever seen Japanese snow monkeys before, right? But you can already guess that, you know, this is probably one, this is a mother most likely, and maybe 10 to 15 if I know the lifespan of 25. I do this without any prior knowledge. So that's called zero-shot learning in AI. If I show you 100 monkeys like that, you'll do almost perfect job in classifying their age. So that's one-shot learning. So you already trained to recognize the age in humans, and with very limited data set, with very limited number of samples, you can predict the age of a monkey almost perfectly. So we are trying to do the same currently for mice and for other animals using just their pictures, predicting their age. So using one-shot learning, you can come up with the various disease markers with minimal available number of samples, because I already have deep neural nets trained on millions of samples trained to predict their age, predict the age of the species. We can do cross-species analysis. We can infer causality. I can also age-safe clinical trials enrollment. So right now, people have 60 or 65 as a clinical trials enrollment cutoff. But those drugs that go through those clinical trials are later administered to people who are significantly older. So we want to use age prediction as also one of the parameters in clinical trials enrollment, and try to get aging research into pharma as much as possible. popularize aging research because it's kind of a bridge between AI, biologically relevant AI, and drug discovery. So in your opinion, what is more valuable data type? Is it pictures or genomes? So to me, right now, I think picture is a much more important data type because I can get not only sex, race, eye color, hair color, disease predispositions, the genetic diseases, but I can also get my age, something that I cannot get from the genome. I can guess my weight, height, pretty accurately using the deep neural net, just looking at the face. I can predict my skin health, social status. So, for example, if I'm wearing a suit and a tie, most likely I'm not homeless. You can actually predict many, many other features. That's something that you cannot predict from the genome. So the genome, it's a very expensive data type. It's expensive to generate, expensive to analyze. But the picture is actually a very underutilized data type. So when somebody is taking a picture of you right now, be careful because it actually might be used by insurance companies much better than your genomic information. Because this number kind of defines when you die at this point of time. If you have high-resolution pictures, you can get pictures of your eyes and the iris. So, for example, this phone, Samsung, it unlocks by recognizing your iris. So it's an iris scan also. And from from high-resolution pictures of your eyes, you can already get some indication and some probability of early detection of Alzheimer's. You can do diabetic retinopathy, RP, and many other diseases of the eye you can diagnose just by the picture. So that's a very important data type. And I would say which data type is more dangerous. Right now people are very scared about sharing their genomes because they don't understand what it is. But they are sharing pictures every day. And people can use this picture to make a lot of inferences. So our company works a lot in understanding the value of data for the various applications. And this kind of poses another question. What company has more valuable data? NHS in England, Equifax, 140 million records were just stolen from Equifax, or Facebook. And I would say Facebook has the most valuable data right now. Because you share so much on Facebook, you chat on the messenger, you send your credit card information via Facebook. So they have the most data. And every data, I think, is health data. So every data can be used for health purposes. So we developed a really cool system right now. We're beta testing it. It's called young.ai. So we're trying to track and predict your age on every level without making any medical claims. We're using photos, blood tests. Currently, those two are enabled. But we have many other data types, even the electronic nose signatures for predicting your age. Then we want to see what makes you older or younger, what kind of behavior modifications. And then basically, without making any medical claims, you can make inferences about what kind of makes you older or younger. And we launched it in Basel in September. You can go online and try and take a look. So it allows you to kind of monitor your changes and predicted age over time. This is not the way you should be taking those pictures. And if you want to sell those pictures, you need to do them in clinical settings. But that's what the system can do for you. And it also does the same for on your blood tests. So you can see how you look over time. And as the predictor gets more and more accurate, I think we would be able to do a better job. And then we'll also look at what drugs or supplements or other behavioral modifications actually make you look younger. In some cases, if you gain a little bit of weight, you will actually look younger because you don't have wrinkles or you lose wrinkles. So sometimes it's okay to be a little bit overweight, but not obese. So we partnered with a company called BitFury. So a lot of you have heard about blockchain. They are number one in blockchain outside China. $250 million in attracted capital, actually venture investors, and $250 million in revenue every year. So they design their own semiconductors for blockchain, ASICs. So we partnered with them to put human health data onto blockchain to give people control over their data. Because right now, the most valuable companies in the world are Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Samsung, and Google. And why they're valuable? Because they have so much data about you that they know you better than your mother. And they can target you with advertising better than your mother. We want you to have control over the data they have and the data we have. And ensure that if somebody looks at your data for medical purposes, you know about this. And you can give consent to people to use your data. As a matter of fact, when I presented this concept to one of the companies, one of the pharmaceutical companies we tried to work with, they sent this presentation to compliance and said, well, why do you want to work with a company that wants somebody to have customers control over the data, and also people in underdeveloped countries, for example, in Africa, to make money using their data to essentially buy food. And that's what we are trying to do. So we want to create a blockchain, and we actually created a prototype of a blockchain-based platform that gives you control over your data. We, as Insilico, we developed mechanism to validate your data, so to understand that the data is actually valid, assess the quality of this data, and verify that the data is yours, and understand if the data is unique. And we developed a new token developed by Bitfury's engineers on their Exonum platform. It's kind of a private blockchain platform that is very secure and almost impossible to crack. This token will be the medium of exchange for a variety of health services. Some of those health services will be provided by us. But we want to use this token, crypto token, to create an ecosystem. That's the first time I'm showing this to anybody, actually, where a lot of personal data would be able to be put on blockchain and put on a ledger, so we at least know what people have about us within the pharma companies, within the universities, within the hospitals. Patients would be able to take control of their data, and the FDA would be able to monitor clinical trials much more effectively using the system. So it's not a very new idea. So there are lots of people working on this, and you're going to see a revolution in this particular area within the next 1 to 2 years. So there is a company called Digime, which provides gift cards for sharing your data. There is Patientory that has a token also to regulate kind of a blockchain-based data interchange, but they don't use AI. And there is us. So we are creating a company with Bitfury called LONGENESIS that will issue a crypto token called LIFEPOUND. So you can buy yourself a pound of life. This particular ecosystem allows you to create users marketplace, so you can donate or sell your personal records into the marketplace, and at least you would know what kind of data you have. In many cases, I mean, how many of you store on your computer your blood tests, pictures, and MRIs? How many of you have that? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is a very unique audience, right? Because usually none of the hands would go up. Because you are actually, in some cases, self-experimenting or doing some really cool, interesting experiments, so you need this data. So we would allow you to put that data into a ledger onto blockchain, and then allow people like Google to buy this data from you. So if you allow this data to be accessed anonymously, somebody needs to pay. So you would be able to accumulate some tokens that later you can come and use for medical services, to get a diagnosis, to get a drug, to get tested, etc. So I think when Google Verily right now provides you with free access to healthcare and essentially free tests. So some people consented even to LP, and they're doing it for free for a large number of volunteers. You should actually get paid to get tested. Or Human Longevity and many other people are providing services to you, free tests, or significantly discounted tests to get your data. I think you need to be paid for this data, because right now you don't understand the value of this data. But we have a working system where you can already exchange some of your data. And we came up with some of the very novel concepts. You know the time value of money, that the dollar today is worth more than $1 tomorrow? So we came up with combination value of data. So if you have, let's say, your blood tests, pictures, genome, and maybe you have cancer, so this is a really golden data set, and you can sell it for a lot of money. And in some cases, it will be enough to cure your cancer and leave you with a little bit of spare cash, ideally. But there is also relationship value of data, so data within the family, and also time value of data. So if you have dynamic blood draws from a single individual, it's much more expensive than having this blood tests from other individuals. And I'll skip a few slides. But we're experimenting with that a lot. And as a matter of fact, our first prototype was ready in March. We just don't know how to properly launch it right now, because if we launch it, it could be pretty disruptive. And also, there is a lot of noise about ICOs. People are doing initial coin offerings. And a lot of that is fraud. So we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So I'll skip that. And I'll skip that also. But I want to leave you with some key messages from our experiments, is that any data is health data. If you know that there is a factory which is emitting a certain amount of toxic, ppms of tiny minute molecules into the air, this knowledge is health data. If you have pictures of the person, it's health data. Right now, it also opens a lot of questions. Should you put pictures of your kids online? A lot of people do that, and without kids' consent. I think we need the Data Economics Institute, which would actually identify the value of the data. And right now, we're kind of going into the post-neoclassical world, where economic growth is based around data. So data is valuable. And the AI is making this data valuable. And I think we would be able to make people healthier and do behavioral modifications on a massive scale, not by just motivating people to stay healthy, but actually paying them to stay healthy, giving them a currency to stay younger and healthier. And the LifePound would be able to allow you to do that. So that's a blockchain-based economy with AI. So we can also reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. Because right now, if you think about it, if you fly business class, you do not arrive earlier than people who are flying economy. Same with longevity. So right now, aging and death is the universal kind of unifier. So everybody is in the same boat. Whether you're rich or poor, you are going to get diseases. You might have a little bit more of high utility life if you are rich. But at the end of the day, it's the same end for everybody. So what we are proposing here with this crypto token marketplace of data is an economy where you will be paid to stay healthy and you would be paid to live longer. So that would create a different paradigm, because right now none of the currencies worldwide are backed by tangible assets anymore. So some are, but very few. And here, this is going to be a currency that will be backed by people's data and by people's longevity. And hopefully, we'll be able to get this up and running by February next year. So we already have a prototype and a working system. I also wanted to kind of shameless promotion of the conference. We run an annual conference in Basel on aging and also on blockchain and AI for drug discovery at Basel Life. So you're welcome. It used to be free to attend. Now they're charging for it. And I would like to thank you and thank Metabesity for inviting me here.